I'm delighted to welcome my panelists, a frightfully good-looking bunch, actually. Well done, all of you. Oh, my goodness, you do sink in these chairs. First of all, James Gross from Percolate, who won't be known to all of you, but will be soon. The charming Adam Bain from Twitter, who, as some of you will know from Adweek, is, I think they voted you the most important man in the world, as I recall.
I'm not sure it's that.
I think it's something like that. Michael Zimbalist from the New York Times, who has, I think, done as much in the socialization of traditional publishing as anyone in the world. And finally, Blake Chandley from Facebook. So it's very nice to have you all here. I think just to help people along, James, could you just explain in a minute or so what it is that Percolate does and give us a kind of helicopter view of where you see the organization, the social landscape kind of right now?
Sure. So what was mentioned earlier today, and I think what we are all seeing and all a part of, is that social media is basically defined by the scale, pace, and pattern of how we are creating and consuming media has really changed in the last 5 years, started by Facebook and Twitter and other social platforms. And what this has led to, of course, is the need for brands to become more involved in this rapid change and how, of course, media is created. And we talk a lot about this. We talk about content or media in the metaphors of stock and flow. And so as a brand, you need to go from doing what you already do very well, which is create what we call stock content, sort of these timeless assets that are defined by campaigns and are expected to stay in market for a long time. That's what commercials and billboards and radio and print ads are. But in this new world of social, what we call flow, there is no beginning and end. There's only, of course, the pull to refresh. That's an ongoing stream of content. And you need, of course, to create content at this rapid escalation and speed that you've never been a part of before. So moving from a campaign-based model of creation to an always-on or real-time model of content creation. And Percolate is a technology platform that helps brands live at the intersection between what's culturally relevant to the audiences they're trying to reach with what they stand for as a brand. We're a 2-year-old company, and of course, I'm very honored to be here with much larger, more well-known platforms.
Thanks, James. The other day I was trying to explain to my mum what it is that you do. It didn't go well, I should tell you.
Fault.
Now, obviously, you know, from a stock and flow point of view, populating and maintaining your social narrative, particularly in the biggest platform for maintaining social narrative, which is, of course, Facebook, is a big deal in itself. And Blake, you know, about a year ago, it was all about IPO, as I recall, the conversation around Facebook. And now, a year later, it's all about ROI. And I think it'd be very interesting to kind of hear from you, because everyone knows how much money and time Facebook has invested with its client council and others in proving out the ROI. And I wonder if you could give us kind of an overview of where you see that and the beginnings of real return for advertisers.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing question. I've been in this space now for around 10 years, and formerly with Yahoo now. And we did a great job at the beginning talking around our kind of currency was clicks, right? And we did a wonderful job talking about accountability in the medium, and that's how we, you know, our point of difference versus some of the other traditional media. And it got to a point where everything was around what the click-through rate was. And business models were built, and in some cases that's a really legitimate and real business metric, especially for some DR and some of the online players. What we found though over the last couple of years is that there's almost zero correlation between click and building a brand offline, right? So, you know, that's not information we discovered, that's just the industry's discovered. And so we need to move in a different direction. And so about probably 18 months ago, we started a really strong project around how do we define measurement, and it all came down to how do you drive boxes off the shelves, right? So at the end of the day, the folks in this room, brands all over the world, their job as marketeers to move more product or more service. And we spent a lot of time with Nielsen, with Data Logics, with the research departments of the agencies and the clients themselves, and have aggregated, you know, now hundreds of studies that actually show impact, primarily with Facebook, because we're self-interested in that. We announced some research last year where 60 programs were measured using media metrics, traditional media analytics versus clicks and things like that. Of the 60 campaigns for brands that are everyday brands in our households, 50% of them had a 70% of them had a 5x ROI and 50% of them, 70% had a 3x ROI or greater, 50% had a 5x ROI or greater. And there were campaigns like the big one last year that we just talked about was Samsung, right? With the largest launch in the history of the brand, the Galaxy 3S, and we spent a lot of time working with their marketing department, how we're going to analyze the investment they made on Facebook. And the results that they put out, which became a public case study, where they reached, in a very short period of time, 105 million households in the US. They increased brand favorability by 10 points. Those folks exposed versus not exposed to the campaign were 85% more likely to buy. They generated $130 million in attributable sales. So that was specifically, they measured it, their research department, which is a 13x ROI. So we keep having these great examples of big and small brands, which we think the whole world's moving in that direction, and that's going to become the new benchmark, if you will.
You're suggesting then that the Facebook-Samsung campaign is directly responsible for what's happened to Apple's share price since then? I just want to be sure I'm on the right
I'm an Apple shareholder, so I hope not.
Yeah, me too. Son of a bitch. It's annoying. So I wanted to ask actually Blake and Adam together. One of the things that advertisers have spent a lot of money, a lot of time investing in the sort of the first wave of their relationships with Facebook and Twitter is building up fan bases in the case of Facebook and follower bases in the case of Twitter. And I'm curious, and Adam, maybe you can start us on this. Do you see a strong correlation between those brands that have built up strong followers and those brands that are successful as advertisers on the platform? Blake, if you can kind of come back with that as well.
Yeah, we're seeing a huge correlation between engagement by consumers to brands on the platform and then even business outcomes, partly what Blake talked about. But I actually think it starts with part of what James was talking about, which is the content and the idea of the campaign itself. We're one of the only platforms in the world for marketers where you win on the platform by being good versus what we've trained marketers to do in digital, at least for the last 18, 20 years, which was solely being loud. And there's even an economic incentive for being good. The way our auction works, for example, is that it's the engagement rate of the ad by the consumer times the bid. So you can actually bid, you can win more, you can drive more engagement and ultimately more outcomes by doing that. And I think part of the reason that is part of where the ad shows itself. In many of these social platforms, the message from the marketer actually comes in stream. And if you think about in search.
I'm so sorry. Did anyone read that tweet that was just up on the screen then? Apparently Centro did a room drop of a charger, and someone asked the question I wonder if the Centro room drop charger works with the Trojan giveaway that they were given yesterday, which is extraordinary. It's made me not remotely interested in what you were saying. But do carry on. I'll keep helping with those as they go on. Yeah.
There's three levers that search in particular has trained us to have, which is the first order bit in search was all about what's your keyword, what's your targeting. Second order bit was all about what's your bid. The last thing that in the far down on the triage was what's your content, what's your creative, what's the idea. So much so that you did a search and you saw clearly that the ad was created by machines. What these in-stream platforms are doing are actually completely flipping that. The number one question now is what's the creative, then followed by the targeting and then the bid.
Okay. So, Blake, and again, if creative's so important, and I think you might touch on from Facebook's point of view, the algorithmic defect of how better quality content increases your performance in the auction and the bid, because I think that's something that's very important for people to understand. help me answer that question from the context of Facebook. Are the brands that have invested in fan bases and invested in content the same brands that are the most effective advertisers on Facebook?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I was out in California this week, and we were talking about this specifically. There was this, about 3 years ago, there was this mass move towards building fans, right? And it was a currency that was really, really easy to grab a hold of. Like, yeah, how many fans do I have? And I'd be sitting in corner offices with CMOs and even boards, and the question kept coming up, how many fans do I have and how many does my competitor have, right? And I know the agencies were giving directives, I'm sure some of your agencies, which were, we need 1 million fans by next quarter. I need to report that as part of my, part of my KPIs to my boss. I mean, it became, we pivoted so far towards the number of fans being the most important criteria, and we really strongly believe that fans are an important part of the base, right? So it is how people publish into the feed, and Adam's right, 40% of all time on Facebook is spent within the news feed. It's very important for brands to have a presence there. And better publishing strategies, better content, better engagement levels directly impact the algorithms that allow people to see that both organically, and you can amplify that through through paid service, paid advertising. But I think the core premise is not about how many fans you have. I think this is really, really important, something you'll hear us talk a lot about over the next 6 to 12 months. It's about the quality of those folks, right? And it's not about the size of the community, it's around how engaged that community is and how that aligns with the brand strategy. We do believe that people's best customers should be their fans. Like, we think it's a unique way to touch them. With the number of people that are coming to Facebook on a daily basis, it's a unique way to interact with them. But it's not about getting more fans than your competitor, because that's a chase to the bottom. And at the end of the day, the quality of those fans gets impacted, and we just think that's a mistake.
So few people have more real devoted fans because they pay and show up on a daily basis than the New York Times. And Michael, I mean, it's unlike the other guys here, you actually publish something, you actually make content, and it's been a huge transformation for the Times, obviously first to the web and now into social platforms. And those of us that have been sort of quite close to it are amazed and delighted with what you've been doing. And it would be great to give people a summary. And also, I think you're in the press this morning about one of your products that you're now in the ad tech business.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so social has become woven into really the fabric of all the work that we do across the enterprise. And I guess the reason, if the reason that Willie Sutton robbed banks is because that's where the money is, the reason social is so important to us is that's where the audience is. So
the New York Times is now social by design.
I mean, I'd never put it that crisply, but in many respects, we see social as integrated throughout the organization, in our newsroom, in our marketing department. And we use each of the social platforms a little bit differently, but largely as an audience engagement mechanism. So we've been on Google Plus, and we've done Hangouts on Google Plus with our editorial talent. We use Facebook sort of to show the breadth of our content. We think of Facebook as more of a publishing platform, and we use Twitter as an audience engagement platform. We listen, we amplify, and we promote, and we create this virtuous circle between marketing and editorial that really didn't exist with that kind of simple communication going back and forth. So I'll give you an example of it. On live events has really, the coverage of live events, I think, has really been transformed by social and social in general.
Before you do that, I'd just like to just quickly ask you one more question, and then we'll come back to that. We know with lots of digital publishers, increasingly people like Gawker and HuffPo, there's a kind of digital Darwinism almost, where the news cycle is increasingly been driven by the popularity of specific pieces and articles sort of rising up to the top, and with Reddit and other platforms. Is that digital Darwinism influencing the content you make in the New York Times?
I don't think so.
Thank God.
I think we're very careful to make sure that we're not, writing to the popular meme and, deploying resources against it, in the old, what time is the Super Bowl on, kind of a
Right.
content factory. It's just one of many data points. Editorial judgment always will win the day. Human editorial judgment of what are the most important stories will trump anything. But I think, increasingly as every organization becomes more data driven and data aware, we are more aware of what is trending, what memes are taking off, which one of our stories is getting engagement on social platforms. It's still, it's worth saying, it's still sort of a very small segment of our audience overall, but it's the fastest growing segment of our audience are the social referrals that do come to us through, Twitter, Facebook, and actually, it's worth mentioning Reddit tends to be our number 3 refer socially.
Really?
Yeah.
So sorry, I think I deflected you in the middle of the conversation. You're about to tell us.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think the way we use the social platforms is very much like a brand as much as anything else. I mean, we listen, we find where the engagement is. We sometimes amplify through paid media on these platforms. So the one example is we're obviously covering a lot of live events. We're covering the conventions. When we were covering the Republican convention. When Clint Eastwood came up and spoke, we were live streaming these things, and I don't know if you remember this, but Eastwooding, #Eastwooding became a meme, and people started to post pictures of themselves standing beside empty chairs, and they started to trend on Twitter, and so our marketing department, which watches that, said to our editorial, hey, this is trending, and we have the clip. If we put the clip up, we'll promote it. So there's this sort of editorial collaboration in that sense. It wasn't like, hey, stop what you're doing and go cover the convention. I mean, we were going to be covering the convention, but it's very much like a brand would use the platform to amplify, listen, engage, amplify.
They've done some incredible work with Twitter data in particular about cascade and some of the things that are out there.
Yeah, so we also like have a very, very good analytics to watch what's trending among our stories, and we promote it with a module, most trending stories. That's happening in social.
Let's come back to that. James, I'm very conscious that it's very easy for this conversation to be dominated by Facebook and Twitter, but there's a lot more to the social universe than that. There's Google+. Although Torrance Boone from Google yesterday saw me with someone who he thought I shouldn't be with and said, I'm going to take a picture of you two and post it on Google+. And I said, well, that's okay, because no one will see it then. So it's going to be, no, only kidding. But I'd be very interested in you guys talking a little bit about Google+ in as much as you can, but also about Tumblr and other parts of the social sphere, and even feel free to comment if you wish on the newly emergent MySpace, possibly, maybe.
Sure. Well, I think actually starting with MySpace is interesting. I think in 2010 there was an argument whether or not Facebook would just sort of own social, as if social and media was this zero-sum game and someone could swallow all of our time and attention. But what's increasingly relevant now in 2013 is that it's not sort of a one-platform game. And in fact, Facebook and Twitter sit harmoniously in very different ways, and consumption patterns reflect that. But increasingly as well, there's other platforms. Tumblr was mentioned as an increasingly important platform to reach younger people that in some ways might be looking for privacy, might be looking for a different creative outlet. Pinterest is a platform that we all know about, and I think is very important in the larger marketing ecosystem of how you think about creating content. Google+, clearly Google, with the behemoth that they are, see the importance of social and are going to play there. So they're going to be relevant because they're big and strong and they are good at making products. One that wasn't mentioned is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has moved to a content platform, right? LinkedIn is maybe the best performing stock right now in sort of our social space. What Jeff Weiner has clearly made, the move towards is becoming a media platform, becoming a content platform, where you'll go to LinkedIn to engage in an always-on stream of content, like you do with the different platforms that we have up here. And just to go back to my original point, the macro effects that are happening is the scale, pace, and pattern of media consumption has totally changed. And what we're really starting to find is there really is no limit to the amount of content that we can consume and where we can consume it. The challenge, again, for the brand, though, goes back to Adam's question, which is in a world where you have Facebook going from 1 billion to 6 billion people, where you have Twitter going from 200 million people and 500 million or 400 million tweets per day to probably 1 billion people. You have LinkedIn going from 150 million people to 1 billion people. You're going to be able to reach the entire world on these platforms. That's never really been possible as a brand before, right? Even how you bought media wasn't on a global level. These platforms are truly global. And in the way, of course, the data is thrown off these platforms, you're going to be able to reach anyone you want. But what are you going to say, and how are you going to scale and sustain it? And in a world, again, where there's no bookend, there's simply a pull to refresh, and it's always on. So these are daunting challenges, only increased by the idea that we don't know how many platforms we can all actually contain.
So, you know, when you talk to people outside this country, particularly in Asia, and they talk about such and such a service having 450 million customers in China, but the fear is that 80 or 90% of them are ghost accounts anyway, and that even of the 10 or 20% of them that are real accounts, the amount of dormant behaviors in those accounts is important. Do you think there's a danger that we are collectively overcooking our estimates of how big and important these platforms are, and even if the actual subscriber numbers and user numbers are legitimate, that the activity numbers are less than, I'm leaving you two out of this just for a second, that are maybe less than people have gotten excited about?
Sure, I think that's possible. Very clearly, I mean, Facebook is become an identity utility, and again, not just a proxy of one here, but if you travel the world, you talk to people, they're on Facebook, I connect with them, they're there, right? Most countries in the world now you go to, you have that relationship, and it is an identity thing. Twitter is interesting in that it of course became so popular so early on with media. It classically, I think, quote unquote, could punch above its weight, right? With the idea that media owns it, it's all over TV, so it can feel bigger than it is. But the raw numbers that now Twitter puts out shows that this is a very important platform for the entire world. I mean, you can look at the unrest in third world countries where Twitter played a very important proxy to how people communicated. And the data, whether it's...
Sometimes I'm astounded that the 1917 revolution took place in Russia without social media. I don't know how I have no idea how they managed to get their shit together.
I think the argument Adam would make was it probably would have happened quicker if there was Twitter.
Oh, so. That's true. But I mean, it's amazing when you think about it in those terms. Adam, is there some kind of... Everyone's got an 80-20 rule. I'm not sure you have, Blake, but but in terms of the number of people that are active on Twitter, if you kind of apportion who's tweeting versus, so the tweeters versus the spectators, how does that, or I'm not saying one's more important than the other, but I'm interested to know how it shakes up.
It's about 60-40, so 60% of people that come in on a 30-day basis tweet, 40% just listen. We think that's a healthy ratio. We think it actually may even shift.
So 60% of people come in actually...
They listen, 100% listen.
Right, sure, yeah.
60% tweet, 40% just sit back and listen, we think that's healthy. I think as marketers, what we care about are the people that are listening and engaging.
Right.
And there's some interesting, areas of engagement, and certainly the retweet is a good one, which is people moving your message on your behalf, which is something that's unique to Twitter. Like, again, I'll use search as a really good example. I'm sure you woke up this morning and did a search on a search engine, but I'm guessing you weren't so informed that you took a screenshot of the entire screen and emailed it out to your entire email address book.
I didn't, no.
Or seen a ad somewhere, homepage takeover somewhere, and taken a screenshot of that homepage takeover and email it out to your entire email address book. But that's happening every single day on Twitter. People are retweeting messages from both media and also brands. And marketers. In 2011, for example, the most retweeted tweet of the year actually came from a marketer itself. So it's proof that at least good content will travel through the system really effectively.
So one of the things that people will always want to know, and I'd like, actually, we can all kind of chip into this. If there were 3 or 4 kind of hero marketers on Twitter and on Facebook, and then James and Michael, you can add into the social marketers. Who would you call out that the people who in this room that work for brands all over the country should be thinking, this is what we should be looking at? And this can be small, it can be a business to business thing, it can be a mega retail thing or a mega brand, but I'm kind of interested to know who you think are the kind of current ninjas of social marketing through the prism of your platform.
So I'll give you two. One is American Express has done a terrific job on our platform. 2 years ago, we launched a platform called Sync, where if you sync your American Express card to your Twitter account and just tweet with a hashtag, it unlocked an offer, a discount right on the card, so that when you walked into a physical retailer and swiped the card, it actually gave you a discount there without a coupon or anything else. This past January, we took it a step further, which is you just tweet with a hashtag and you've synced your card. You can buy a good digitally, so literally it's so seamless to make a purchase now. You just tweet it and the product shows up at your house within a week. So that's one. Two is Audi in particular has done a terrific job. And it's really been in this area of the unique relationship between Twitter and TV. And part of our value prop is, since such a big chunk of our user base is mobile, turns out if you're watching TV, you're either consuming tweets about what you're watching or tweeting about it themselves. Audi 2 years ago was one of the first marketers to use a Twitter hashtag at the end of their 30-second commercial to kind of extend the experience. And they've taken it a step further and kind of driving the experience now, or at least communicating back home with people that are watching TV.
Blake?
Yeah,
American Express and Audi, so we've got to move up the alphabet now. So beginning with B. This could take some time.
There are companies that are doing interesting kind of one-off type gimmicks, and there are companies that are building social at the core of what they're doing.
No,
right?
that's
I
what
think
we
Audi.
want.
I mean,
no gimmicks. No gimmicks.
I think American Express is doing some great stuff. They've done very similar work with us on the platform. The other one that strikes me is Nike's doing some phenomenal stuff. They were the #1 most innovative company according to Fortune last week in the world, ahead of people like Apple and Google and others. And they're really redefining who they are. They're using technology to do that. And I think that they're building some really cool social into the core of that. And then there are smaller companies. I mean, we kind of default to the big American companies, but on our Facebook Studio platform, which has hundreds of great video case studies, I saw one this morning. I was laying in bed looking at that instead of searching, but you know, I saw something in my news feed, and it was from this brand called Griffin's, which I've never heard of. Griffin's in New Zealand, right?
Wow.
And they're a biscuit company, so they basically sell biscuits. And they'd embraced social in a way because one of their users had asked them to bring back a brand, Chocoaid, right, which had been shut down maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago. They brought it back based on consumer guidance, so consumers had spoken up, and it kind of virally going across the country. Now it's the #1 biscuit brand in the country, has been for the last 2 or 3 months running. Right, those are kind of interesting things we probably never hear of in organizations or kind of events like this, because we always hear about American Express and Audi and Nike and Procter & Gamble and companies like that, but there's some great stuff going on all over the world, I think.
So do you get the sense that the big retailers in particular who really kind of lent in a big way to your platforms, and the Walmarts and let's not talk about JCPenney, but the Walmarts and the Macy's and others are now actually getting, because Walmart's up to what, 20 million fans or so, I'm going to guess. Blake, and Macy's probably
More,
6.
yeah.
How many?
30.
30. Yeah. And Macy's probably 7 or 8 million. Are you getting the sense now that you're getting a kind of consistent narrative from those people that they're being able to differentiate between the value to their business of those fan bases versus the broader list of customers? Yeah,
I mean, some of these folks like Walmart and some others are doing really, really sophisticated analytics, and they're using their entire resources. We sent, and it became kind of publicly known, we sent what we call our M team, so Mark Zuckerberg's directs, all went down and spent 3 days in Bentonville. And it's the only time they've done that. They're going to do another one as well, but they sent the entire team down. They spent 3 days with the board and the executive team at Walmart, right? And talking around the synergies of the companies. Now, connecting with users, bringing relevance to people's lives is very, very important. It's not about how do you put deals in front of people. You know, it's around how do you integrate that knowledge, the insights that sit there, and pass those right down to the store level managers so they can actually activate communities using these platforms, which become important in people's lives. And so they're doing some really, really innovative things together with us, and I'm sure with other folks. So yeah, they've definitely embraced it.
Okay. So Michael, I'm desperate to, I mean, I'd love you to answer the same question from your perspective, but also very interested for you to have the opportunity to talk about particularly what you've been doing with Twitter, which I think is very exciting.
Sure. So we've been visualizing the way our content flows through Twitter now for a couple of years.
Which is available to see outside.
And you can see it in the hallway, right? So you can actually watch story by story. If there's a story you've tweeted recently, we can probably find you in this stream of tweets and retweets. And so we started visualizing this, and we look at it, and it has a multitude of purposes. But one of the purposes that was unexpected was that we discovered that brands need content to share. I mean, James has alluded to this pull to refresh world we live in. This world where even Walmart has to do more than deals. You can't have a deal every second flowing through out to these 30 million fans. Content becomes a value-added service that brands can supply as part of their stream of conversation, as part of their listening. And we discovered that brands were sharing our content just naturally. I mean, we find brands tweeting stories, and at first it was sort of perplexing. Like, why would Chobani tweet this story, and then you look at the story and you realize, well, this story is about kind of pleasure, affordable pleasure, and something like a non-fat yogurt might want to be associating themselves with things like that. And the interesting thing was, though, that when these links are shared, the click on the link brought the user back to an experience on our website which wasn't like a Chobani experience necessarily. In fact, whatever advertising we were running against that story was there. In the typical case, it was just, it had nothing to do with a Chobani customer's need at that moment.
Not a competitor yogurt.
Yeah, at the worst case, it's a competitive yogurt, right? So we thought we could add some value for these brands who need content by giving them this opportunity to affix their advertising permanently to that content for a set period of time and make a unique link that does that. And that became this content marketing platform called Ricochet, which we've now launched and run and many campaigns for many advertisers. And just this morning, thank you, Rob, for giving me the opportunity to say this up here. Just this morning, we announced that not only is all the content from the New York Times available to share in this manner that brings the content to your consumers with your creative messaging attached to it, but we've added all 26 Condé Nast sites, we've added Advertising Age, we've added Forbes, and we've added People. So it's now like this content marketplace, self-service. You need something to share. You've got your stock, you need some flow. You could go out and make it. I thought it was very interesting in this conversation. We've been using the word sort of creative, the brand's creative, and content interchangeably, because in these platforms, the creative is content, and you can make so much of it. And eventually, you're going to have to calculate the ROI of the stuff you're making. I'm not sure people are doing that, a return on engagement. But you're going to find that for a return on engagement, sharing a story that you own the branding around is going to do as well as sharing something that you're making and investing a lot of money in to make as a brand.
James, tell us what you think about, we've heard a lot recently about brand newsrooms, which sounds kind of interesting and scary and in equal measure. Do you think that this is a serious wave, or do you think it's something that will come and go and we won't hear any more about brand newsrooms in a year from now?
Sure. So I'm a disciple of Marshall McLuhan, right? He's sort of like the man I look to when I try to understand why people do things in media. And one of his famous sayings is, the biggest mistake we make in a new medium is we replicate an old medium, right? So when I hear brand newsroom, I think, well, why are we trying to deal with social with a way that we used to create news, right? So everyone's famously talked about the Oreo ad on Twitter, in which 15 people stood in a room to tell you that the lights were out and to make a photo, right? And so I think people are getting very excited about that, though, because they created real-time content. Now, there's a question whether or not it takes 15 people to tell you that the lights are out at the Super Bowl and create a piece of media, but...
Well, at Microsoft, of course, what they used to do was if a light bulb failed, they used to just declare darkness as the new standard and move on. But sorry.
So no, I think the importance of newsroom, or just the concern I have about the term newsroom, is now brands are going to go out and hire 45X journalists and say, sit on top of Twitter and see what you can do. That's one way to do it. I think it might be inefficient, but what you're seeing with newsroom, and why I'm excited by the term in general, is brands are realizing that these platforms demand real-time content, that you do have to live at the intersection of what's culturally relevant to the audience I'm trying to reach with what I need to say. And where the newsroom again becomes expanded, I'll use Red Bull as a good example. You were asking for brands, and clearly Red Bull is very good at creating media and very unlike every other brand. But they're creating anywhere between 100 to 200 tweets per day. They're a leading indicator of potentially where a lot of brands are going to have to go, right? And so at 100 to 200 tweets per day, if you talk to most brands and they say a lot of our tweets take between 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 days to get approved, that's not going to work in this new world of the scale, pace, and pattern of media. So the newsroom, I'm fine with the newsroom metaphor if it does really push us ahead and it does lead us to brands creating more interesting, relevant, and timely content.
So we're moving to the out of time phase. But Michael, go on.
No, I think what James is saying is that brands have to be live, real time, operating 24/7, and this intersection of what I have to say with what's culturally relevant is a moving target, and it's where you need to be.
Okay. But let me build on that really quickly, because marketing's always been about winning the moment. What's maybe different now is that the moment is unfolding in real time, so that water cooler moment that maybe used to happen, the next day is unfolding a little bit faster before people's eyes. But it doesn't always have to be about that big televised event moment. There are even, I'll use TV just in a smaller moment. I'll give you a real example of somebody else doing it right. Fox launched the movie Prometheus in the UK, and they actually did it in an interesting TV and Twitter way, which is during the opening of Homeland in the UK, they ran the first commercial pod, and Fox was the first commercial in the pod. And they ran a traditional 30-second trailer. And at the very bottom third of the trailer, they ran a Twitter hashtag. They didn't choose hashtag Fox or hashtag Prometheus. They chose hashtag Are You Seeing This? So all of a sudden they got people that were on their phones watching the commercial, the first time the Prometheus trailer had ever been shown, talking about how excited they were to see the movie. They cut back to the commercial break. At the very next pod, the very next break, Fox came back and played the trailer again, but grayed out. And there was an announcer that came on that said, everybody in the UK can't wait to see Prometheus. And they started bringing tweets on the screen that had just played out, that people had just said 15 minutes ago, to show real-time social proof that people were excited and anticipating the movie. So I think marketing for sure has been about winning the moment throughout history, and all this stuff's doing is just making it a little bit easier.
I mean, the relationship between Twitter and television is becoming highly celebrated. You just bought Bluefin. Is that closed? Is that
we Twitter, our perspective is that maybe folks in digital took a wrong path, which is everybody came to the market with an or conversation, digital or TV. We think that was completely wrong, and that our value prop is really about Twitter and TV. Those two things together can actually make TV marketing go further and faster as much as it is digital. So we've done a couple things in that regard. One is, outside of spending a bunch of time with media to show them the power of doing on-air integration. At the end of December, we announced with Nielsen that Nielsen's going to be releasing a rating this fall season called the Nielsen Twitter TV rating. Essentially, it brings a depth that hadn't been at the rating level before. It used to be that we used to measure ratings on GRP and TRP, so reach. So what the Nielsen rating does is bring a engagement measure, one of tweets, and it's designed to overlay each other so that you get an interesting perspective of TV viewing behavior, not just how many people saw it, but how engaged the audience was. And then the second thing is we acquired a company called Bluefin Labs, which was 25 MIT Media Lab engineers, and we're working on integrating those.
Okay. So unbelievably, to me, at least, we're out of time. It only leaves me to obviously thank James, Adam, Michael, and Blake, to apologize very specifically to Torrance, who I didn't realize was in the audience until a couple of minutes ago. And also, whilst there's still time for more activity before you have to check out today, it's good to know for all of you that watched a movie whilst you were here, it just comes up as movie on the bill without a title. But thank you guys very much. It was great to have you here. Thank you.